back to reality. It's Mark
Okay, we are back. So, Mark, what are your thoughts on that?
As to whether or not we're a continuous, I think that's an arrogant thought. I think it's an egotistical thought.
Why you say so?
Well, first of all, it's anthropic and self-aggrandizing. And I really think it detracts from the way that the universe actually is versus how people wish that it were, or that wish that it was. I mean, we don't think about all of the species of animals that we kill for food, or all the ones that we put into zoos, or that we use for animal experiments, or trees that we cut down, or grass that we mow, or any of these other things, which are for all, biologically alive. But we don't ask ourselves whether or not they have souls, whether or not there's a list of things that the dog can do to make sure the dog gets to go to heaven, or how does the cat get into heaven? Oh, the cat's not invited. Why? Well, it's not a person. Well, how come out of all of the animal species that have ever existed on this planet for the 4.5 billion years it's been here, right? 99.9% of all of the animal species that have ever lived on Earth are dead. And none of them had souls. It's just us. That's an arrogant thought, right? If it's either every conscious entity has a soul.
First, define what do you mean by soul? What that means.
What I'm saying is when a religious person has a very clear concept. I mean, depending on their belief system, but yet generally it's an anthropomorphic personification of themselves when they're deceased. No. It's you, but invisible. It's you, but in heaven, with wings and a halo.
So you're talking about the perception, how's it going to look in the physical body or something?
But that's how people think of it. And a lot of people are saying, well, we're going to ascend, energetically. And I'm like, well, if that's the case, then what would be the point of having a physical paradise? That's ridiculous. If you look in the Christian Bible, if you look in the Christian Bible in the book of Revelation, they describe what heaven looks like. And that's where the pearly gate comes from, and it's got other gates that are made of other gemstones and other precious materials, and it has dimensions. It's this big by that big, and it's got gold bricks and streets, and it's like, what's the point? What is the point of all of that? And the point is, if ecstasies of a divine nature existed for us beyond death, we wouldn't be able to describe them in any human terms because we have no basis of reference for them.
Well, when you ask religious people that question, they say, well, we can't describe because we can't see, but we believe.
That's not what they say. What they say is they refer you back to their book.
And they say that if you believe in something you don't see, what is the word in English, then you're basically faithful or whatever. I don't know the word translation. Do you remember that?
What is it now?
It's from the Bible.
I'm not sure what passage you're talking about.
I'm talking about, if I translate correctly, those who believe in what they can't see, that they are more faithful or whatever, they're going to be saved than those that see and believe.
Well, yeah, I mean, seeing is believing, and these people are trying to sell you a great big belief without any seeing.
But don't you think that that's the message of that religious call, whatever? You don't have to see what you believe in. That's why it's believe in the first place. You believe because you can see. You don't believe if you see. You already know. It's a fact to you.
Yeah,
so that's something.
Yeah, and people use that word, and they a lot. But I mean, without dipping into any further, like the beliefs that they have, I think we were talking about how people make this mortal decision to describe God in terms of being just like them, of living in a great big house, of sitting on a great big throne, just like a king would, just like they'd like to do. And and when you ascribe that idea further down the line, you end up with people like the Mormons who believe that one day they get to be God. It's the most egotistical, arrogant thought, and it negates the real truth of the universe, which is this: as far as we know, there is no evidence that we get to do anything when we are no longer wrapped in this mortal coil. When we expire, that is it. No one has ever come back to say otherwise. There's no magical particles that we haven't discovered operating at weird energies that would explain why humans have a soul, but we can scan the hell out of them with, everything in the world, and it's not there. So it's described as magic. Well, people can say, well, it exists in different dimensions.
So who we are then? Who are we, in your opinion? Because looks like if we don't continue to exist, and if you say there is no God, and what are we then? In your imagination.
Well, there's certainly no God in the sense that.
Well, I hear what you're saying, not
Yeah.
a God in the sense that it was portrayed to us, or how people portray it, or made a legend of it and myth of it, and this is how it looks like, and this is how it works like, and all that. But then, okay, so you're saying there is no God, that we are biologically only existing, and we die when our brain dies and stuff. Is that it to it? There's all this. We die, and there is no God, and there is no continuance, and
There's only continuance in the sense that all of the matter and energy that make you up will continue to exist. You won't be a human. You won't be awake. You won't have consciousness. You'll be carbon and hydrogen and a big pile of neutrons that are tied up in atoms so they don't decay in 10 minutes like normal neutrons. And, you get to exist in that way. It bothers me that people look at a universe where...
Why you say I gonna exist it that way, or whatever, anybody? Why you say you? Why you say that word?
Well, whatever person.
But that's not the person anymore.
It's aggravating that...
You're saying that they just break down to chemical components, and then...
And atomic bits when the sun swallows us up. When it...
And that's nothing anymore?
And then it'll convert down and down and down to whatever energetic and matter forms that it converts to until the universe dies the heat death that's coming to it in another 15 billion years.
I don't see it that way.
Well, I see it that way because that's what we know about the universe.
So there is no God. We die. We become sound or something.
Well, we become whatever we're reducible to.
Waves and particles.
Well,
and
yeah,
waves.
we become essentially waves and particles, and bits of elements, and etc. etc.
So that means there is no consciousness.
No, there is consciousness, but
What is it?
But there's no.
You left it behind somewhere because I didn't see.
Consciousness isn't some mystical cloud floating up above that you can stick a straw in and suck off some consciousness.
We connect consciousness with God because we say it was before everything came into existence. So there was, I don't call it intelligence, but it's a mind or a consciousness we call right now. And we make a God of it, right? Because this is how we see it. We cannot see it from the top. We only can see from where we are at the moment, and what we know about it, what we experienced. So you say that there is no God. So there is no connection between God and word consciousness for you?
No. Why would there be?
Because, okay, so I understand, but explain why.
Why
People connect consciousness with God and from religious perspective.
Okay, well, think about
But
this.
you don't think so. So why you don't think so?
At one point in the evolution of human beings,
Mm-hmm.
prior to them exiting the African continent, their numbers at one point dwindled down to hundreds, maybe a couple of thousand, but it was most likely, hundreds, 1,500 maybe. Total specimens of the Homo sapien group. We almost died out completely. And we survived. We made it. We didn't die. And we were able to move into Europe and exploit other food sources and other things in order to become this vast viral life form that's choking the petri dish of the planet to death. And here we all are. We almost went out like a candle. So that means that in our not too long ago, on a universal scale, history, there were only 1,500, 2,000 maybe, humans, Homo sapiens sapiens. Well, if they all had souls, that means there were only 2,000 souls. 2,000 consciousnesses.
Well, I
Right?
don't like word soul because soul seems to be connected more to biological
well, let's
existence.
refer to the soul as that straw they're using to tap into that big cloud of, it's the connecting line that runs them
from the universe to the
from
person.
the universe to the person. We'll call that the soul, that string that attaches them, from which they're drawing all of this supposed mystical whatever. At any one time, because human beings are the only ones in belief systems that actually have a real consciousness. They're not just...
So what do you call that string? What is the name for it? What the name you want to use for that string?
A bullshit tether.
Shut up. I mean...
And here we are. There's 7 billion of us now. So, who printed up all the extra souls?
Printed up.
And isn't that like counterfeiting? And if that's the case, doesn't like the large number of souls or taps into that consciousness devalue it just due to sheer numbers? You know what I mean?
No, I don't. Explain yourself. What do you mean by printed up so many souls?
Well, I mean, okay. I'm just being facetious, but it's like, why are we the only ones
Where?
that get to tap into the big, take our bullshit tether and tie it into the universe?
Who else you want to include?
I don't
Who
know.
you talking
How
about?
come elephants aren't in
Oh,
that?
you mean you're upset about that?
I'm not upset by it. I'm just saying that from a religious, we're talking about it from not my viewpoint. I'm saying from a religious standpoint, these people will sit there and tell you that cows and chickens and your puppy dog and your favorite hamster and goldfish, they get to die. They're just material objects. They don't have a shred of spirituality or consciousness or even hope, right? What the Gnostics called the Sophia, the divine spark.
Do you think they do?
Why wouldn't they? If we've got one, they've got one. I don't think they do. But you can't say that humans have it and other mammals don't have it. Why don't chimpanzees have it? They've got 97% of our DNA. Why don't bananas have it? Bananas have 25% of our DNA. Now, how come a damn banana isn't like talking to God? Well, because the banana doesn't have a spiritual consciousness because there's no such thing.
No spiritual consciousness, huh?
No. I mean, not in the sense that people think, oh, it's some spooky thing or it's something that's given to us by this magical lord.
No, I'm not talking about that.
The giant sky magician.
let's say that you're right, and there's people who think that way. Right, and there is no God, right?
Certainly not in the religious sense. No.
Not in the religious sense, not at all.
I mean, Einstein referred to God.
Oh, you say if there is not in the religious sense, then there is. You give a possibility that there is in a spiritual
Einstein
side?
Einstein referred to God when he was writing, but he was an avowed atheist. He did not believe in the God of Abraham. So when he said God, he meant like like an entity above the normal cosmos, or he would pose a question that said, a hypothetical, did God have to make the universe the way that he made it? Did he have a choice in how to create everything if he was going to create it? This was not an exercise of him saying, I believe in God. What he's saying is, if such an entity, this higher order being, existed, what would be its nature? You know what I mean?
Okay, so that brings up a question. You're saying God is not an entity, but can God be something else?
God is a tainted term.
What is it then? What God is? What?
The reason that people in the West use the word God with a capital G is because it's taboo to say any of God's names. God has a whole list of names. You're not allowed to say any of them. And so people appropriated this word, God, and they apply it, little g, big G. They do it in all languages. The first line in the Quran mentions God, big G, and God, little g, in the first sentence.
Okay, I'm not asking that, but that's interesting to know.
Well, it says La Allah, Allah, Rasul Muhammad Allah, right?
Well, they have many names in
So
one
La
name,
means
in one person.
no. La means no. Allah with a light L means God, little g, God. Allah, dark L, big God. Rasul Muhammad Allah, right? With a dark L. So what it means is there is no God, except God, big G. And Muhammad is the prophet of God, big G. Right? So, I always get, and I think it's really funny that people in the West are like, oh, they're talking about Allah, man. They got some weird God over there. It's like, it's just the word for God in different language. Brilliance. Idiot.
That was interesting. You brought up the other day about Jesus being black and white and Asian, and this different look for Jesus in every country. Right. And it's interesting because I never thought about that concept at all. That I haven't seen any other pictures than what I saw when I was growing up, and him presented with long hair, kind of skinny looking, with beard, blue eyes. Looks Russian to me, right? Or Polish or something like that.
Yeah. Well, the thing is
so I thought that Jesus just looked like that. The thing is, I never questioned that until I got into religious kind of denominational thing that made me ask questions, why can't I ask questions? Why can't I ask God something, or about God something?
It's a logical continuation of the appropriation of the power of a spiritual concept, right? God is not only a man, for all those men who are in charge of all the religion.
Yeah.
God is not only a man, but he looks like us. And he made us look just like him. And he has a son who also looks just like us, who was born a man, a human mortal, just like us. And so it's a logical appropriation for each culture who absorbs this fripperous inanity to say, and to take it further, he's Chinese, or he's Jewish, or he's African, or he's Scandinavian, whatever it is. Back in early English literature, during the Anglo-Saxon period, they had these things they called dream poems. And there were like lots of different lyric poems, dream poems, epic poems that, epic poems where they tell the story of the heroes. So the longest and one of the earliest, if it might actually be the earliest dream poem, is this story of the crucifixion of Jesus. And it's called The Tale of the Rood. And the root in Anglo-Saxon meant like, we use the word rod, like, to mean like a stick, or a lightning rod. But in Anglo-Saxon, it meant like a post or a tree or a pillar. And it tells the story of the crucifixion of Jesus, but it's the craziest crucifixion of Jesus ever, because Jesus, in this instance, is a Nordic warrior. He's an Anglo-Saxon / Viking lord.
Yeah.
He's muscly.
That's how I remember
He's
him.
blonde. He's like Thor, right? Except Jesus. And he does everything. He's not afraid of the crucifixion, and he does everything but nail the nails in himself. I will take this cross. Like imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 80s being like, I am Jesus, give me the hammer. Pow, pow, pow. I put them in myself because you're a girly man, And it's like, when that story, it was, very popular tale, and it survives to this day. But Jesus is depicted by the Anglo-Saxons as an Anglo-Saxon because they had no frame of reference. They'd never been to the Middle East. They don't know what it looks like there. They don't know what the people were like or what Jesus was like. They heard a little bit about him. They were all illiterate, for the most part. So they just concocted this story that made Jesus them. And it was popular enough in the culture to survive once the Anglo-Saxons were pushed out by the Normans. That whole concept had just sort of ingrained itself. So Jesus was a white guy. I heard a woman when I worked in a physical therapy clinic down in Western Kentucky. She actually said one time, I wish these people who come to this country would learn to speak English. And I was like, well, English is kind of difficult. I'm sure people are working on it when they get here. It's not like they want to be lost that way. And she goes, well, if English was good enough for Jesus, it should be good enough for everybody. and I was like,
oh my God.
What kind of an idiot are you? And I realized that this person actually thinks that Moses and all of those guys really are. They're Charlton Heston in that movie.
But not just that. First of all, whatever Jesus was teaching that woman, she was the completely opposite.
Christians don't like what Jesus said because it's inconvenient to the Roman parts.
What do you mean?
Well, people like the parts of Christianity that allow them to basically, ask for forgiveness and get rid of everything that they've ever done that was terrible, including the murder of a close friend or relative.
So convenient, huh?
It's really
have
convenient.
Somebody else responsible, or if I'm responsible, you're responsible to forgive me, and everything's going to be all right.
But you see, Christians, Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus goes through and clarifies the 10 Commandments for people. He explains to them, whether something is, whether their interpretation is correct or not. So he says things like, you were told not, thou shalt not kill. He says that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm telling you that if you get angry with someone,
go ahead and kill.
Then you're in danger.
Just ask for forgiveness.
Or call them a fool. Then you are in danger of judgment. Jesus said that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, how many Christians do I know who don't absolutely lividly hate everybody that they can think of who's not a Christian, or who's a Christian that doesn't have the same kind of Christianity that they do, or that's anti-Muslim or anti-gay or anti-abortion or anti-something that that somebody else is doing, has nothing to do with them, but it makes them angry.
Uh-huh.
Well,
and what they do about their anger?
They act
Usually.
on it. They become violent. I mean, you can't If somebody hits you, Jesus doesn't say, if the terrorist attacks you, blow up their house and kill their children. Jesus never said that. He said if somebody, hits you on your right cheek, turn to them the left cheek, And if people did that, there wouldn't be anybody hitting anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But people don't want to follow anything that Jesus had to say. So they follow the organization that purports to enunciate and direct the will of God, whether it be Catholicism, Baptists, Mormons, whatever. So they don't, they didn't read that book. And if they did, they read it in a language it wasn't originally written in. And they didn't read it from a critical textual viewpoint or an academic one. They read it like a child would read Harry Potter.
Okay.
And they were like, oh man, and they really imagined...
You're saying they was just very literal about that? Or
They're extremely literal about it.
Everybody has a different interpretation of it.
It's not enough for everybody to have a different interpretation. That is, you cannot say you have the truth of the universe and we just have different interpretations. No! A truth of the universe would be truth. It would be true, and it would just be a truth. It wouldn't be a theory or a speculation, and even a theory would have some basis in reality.
What is the truth in your imagination? What is it? If there is no God, there is no consciousness, if you
there
think
is consciousness.
Okay, so you're saying that there's consciousness. I heard you saying that, but you haven't defined it to me. Well, at least explain to me that I can get where you're coming from, what consciousness is from your point of view.
Okay, well, if I can go back to the analogy of the human being, the human or the human biology being the computer, and the religion is the software. Consciousness is the operating system.
Operating system. Okay, well, software.
Right.
Okay, so mind is a computer brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And software what?
Consciousness is the operating system.
What is operating system?
Well, on your computer it would be, OS, Apple OS, whatever it is. I think mine is, it's Microsoft,
operating system.
whatever it is, 7.0 or...
Okay, so, but where is it coming from then?
What do you mean, where does it come from?
The operating system.
It's built into the biological organism.
Who built it?
DNA.
Where it's coming from?
Where's what coming from?
DNA and everything.
Well, DNA most likely started in the primordial soup of the oceans down around a bunch of volcanic vents about 3.5 billion years ago. And some amino acids were able to replicate themselves on the chemical level. And eventually that got more and more complex, because as energy moves and structure captures, the structures become more complex.
Well, and some sort of energy initiated.
I'm talking about biological energy or just light from the sun. I'm talking about radiant energy and radiation and heat from a volcanic vent.
So if there was nothing at first, that means nothing. Then how that became into existence, there was some energy then, somewhere. It's just that there was a no-interaction with something to make it happen.
In the beginning, you're talking about the beginning of Earth?
No, beginning of everything. And
the beginning of the universe. No, there was nothing.
So you say there was nothing. Nothing means what?
Nothing.
Nothing, that's nothing what? Space,
nope,
time?
Space wasn't a thing, neither was time. And space-time are the same thing.
Okay, so how everything initiated then? What was there that initiated that became this body?
That's a really complex subject that would take a long time for us to sit down and talk about.
We'll have to, but we'll finish right here and we'll be back.